welcome to Bad Ideas, the show where we look at misfires, mistakes, and miscalculations from all throughout history.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and Tony's bringing us the bad idea this week. It's about a futuristic substance that could never do anyone any harm ever, from the early 1900s.
Yeah, this is called Radium Girls. We are talking specifically about radium and some of the side effects that happened whenever we started putting it all over everything. But let's take a step back. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, radioactive materials were the fascination of chemists everywhere. Their properties and potential dazzled scientists before they truly knew what they were looking at or the consequences of handling this material. In 1898, Marie and Pierre Curie discovered radium. It was removed from a sample of uraninite, and which also contained barium and radium. When they separated out these elements, they noticed that the elements glowed in the dark, a previously undiscovered phenomenon and a property of radium chloride. Their discovery glowed a deep crimson color.
Sounds cool. Glowing thing scientists discover. That's like the beginning of most of the movies in the 1950s.
Yeah, I mean, like, previous to this, I'm sure getting that color was only like a weird thing that you would see with certain phosphorus, certain algae, and mushrooms and things like that. So to get something that was kind of static like this was pretty interesting. 5 years after this discovery, Marie Curie would win a Nobel Prize, becoming the first woman to achieve this. A few years later, she would actually win a second, becoming the first person to ever win a pair of the Nobel Prizes.
You know, we don't talk enough about how Marie Curie was just awesome.
Yeah, and like the sacrifices that she would end up giving to science later.
I know she's sort of a byword at some, like, yeah, there's a significant woman, but I want to actually go back and study her life more. I'm just now realizing how little I know about Marie Curie.
Yeah, I was thinking about that whenever I was studying this, and I was like, I don't even fully know what she looks like, so I had to look a bit of that up. I did read that her notes are still so radioactive that you have to wear protection to actually look at them. So she...
I'm not going to... What do you think I'm going to be doing to him, Tony?
Well, I mean, just, you know, thumbing through them or something like that.
Oh, you mean
not
like
you would have
lead.
access.
I thought you meant a different kind of protection.
Ah, yeah. Latex wasn't invented yet. Or it might have been. Who knows? Anyway, because humans are strange and like anything with a visible effect on it, radium became immensely popular. Bottled radium water became a health tonic sold in stores under the Radithor industry as certified radioactive water. Also on the shelves were facial creams that claimed the element would rejuvenate skin. Some companies even began giving it out as an injection for longevity and turned it into a toothpaste.
This is not an uncommon reaction to new discoveries either. When we had electricity as a new thing, people were just walking around zapping each other for like no reason, just trying to see what it would do, thinking it might help with something.
I'm sure there's still some woo-woo treatments out there where you set up like electrodes on your face and all that. Like, I know they've got TENS treatments for actual muscle spasms. Not all of these were as horrific as they sound, as people found that radium salts helped shrink tumors. The treatment would endure and change into the modern day, but people didn't understand why it worked. They didn't understand that it was actually hurting and killing cells. So they thought it was just sort of a miracle element that whatever you put it on would heal.
I could see that train of thought, actually. I can see why you would make that mistake. If you're putting a thing on a bad thing and it makes the thing go away, you might think, this is medicine. It's great.
And it is medicine, but it comes with a heavy toll. Shortly after this, it was found that if you mixed radium salts with zinc sulfide and a little bit of glue, the result was a pale green glowing paint that would cause the zinc atoms to emit photons. It wasn't bright enough to emit during the day, but at night its pale green glow was very apparent. Like, even whenever they've done watches with that aren't radioactive now that have that sort of glowing dial, like, that's very similar to the color you would get with radium. Sometimes you can still find it in old clocks and things if you go to the right antique stores.
I don't think the ones we have today can work like this did, though. Essentially, they worked from the decaying radium, and they would glow forever. If you want them to glow today, you have to either apply electricity or use the boring, like, glows if you've left it in the light for long enough, and then only for, like, an hour.
Yeah, like all the stars on my ceiling.
Do you for real have glowing stars on your ceiling, Tony?
I do. Like, the person that lived here before put up, like, hundreds of them, and I just was like, you know what? I don't mind it that much. I'm not going to get up there and scrape all of these off the ceiling.
Fair play.
This is where the watch industry came in. Soldiers during World War I often had trouble seeing the dials of their pocket watches in the trenches. It was found that if you painted parts of the arms, you could illuminate the watch just enough to tell time, even in total darkness. Also, because of the rough nature of trench life, banded watches became more popular than pocket watches. Usually only women of the time would wear banded watches, but it became much more popular, and that's where most people switched from the pocket watch to the modern watches we have now. The glow was also faint enough that it wouldn't give away your position like striking a match or anything like that would to be able to see your watch face in the trenches. With these becoming popular during the war, the US Radium Corporation began manufacturing them for people on the home front. They became widely popular, and you could always strap that slightly radioactive piece of jewelry to your wrist.
It just occurred to me as you were reading this that World War I and World War II had some pretty significant impacts on fashion and society as a whole, and I wonder what other wars that we've had since then have impacted. If for instance, the Gulf War changed anything about how people dressed, or the war in Afghanistan, as long as it's gone on, has changed fashion or technology in any significant way.
I know a lot of it's changed for like camping gear and all that, but I'm not sure as much for overall fashion.
That's fair.
Maybe like aviator sunglasses and things like that.
I just never thought about the banded watch thing being a gender deal. I mean, I have a banded watch on right now, and I guess I can thank A, the Casio Corporation, and B, World War I, that I can wear this and not look like a lady.
During the radium watch boom, more than 4,000 women were hired to paint watch dials. During 1917 to 1926, this special paint was labeled undark. It was a great job for young women with small hands, and the girls would earn about an average of 17 cents per day working, about 1 cent per watch that they would end up doing. They were told that because of all the health benefits of radium, that working for the company would do wonders for their complexion and overall health.
Before we get into how terrible this company was and how awful the things were that happened to these girls, can we just take a second to recognize that Undark is an amazing name for a product?
It really is. At this time, the US Radium scientists had begun backtracking on any sort of health benefits and began to put out memos and papers critical of working with the substance unprotected. Despite this, the women making the watches were encouraged to use their skin, tongues, and lips to keep the brushes as finely tipped as possible for the best painted dials. Like, whenever you see a painter lick the brush really quick just to give it that fine point, that was something that they were starting to do with the actual radium paint. Since these women were told time and time again that the radium paint was healthy for them, they began to paint their fingernails and even their teeth with the element as a joke. A lot of times they would also take some of it home and paint it on their skin just to have fun, at home. In 1925, one of the first major cases broke out. A young woman named Frances Spletstacher from Connecticut developed anemia and jaw pain. When they went to remove her tooth, a significant portion of her jaw came out with it. Soon her gums and cheek had rotted away. She died within a month of having her tooth removed.
No part of any of that sounded fun.
Yeah, I've had some dental issues before, but never quite that much. Ugh. In a New Jersey factory not far from there, 4 girls developed similar symptoms and died shortly after. A woman named Grace Fryer complained about the same symptoms. When she went to a doctor who x-rayed her, he found that her jaw was littered with small holes. More doctors came together and found that the trend for these young women working in these factories were having the same serious medical issues. And the reason for this is kind of interesting because the radium was used from the body as sort of a calcium substitute. So it would go in and fill these areas and it would just cause the decay around them instead of actually recalcifying the joints. It was an odd side effect. So
the body actually ingested this and then used it in the areas where they had been putting it in their mouths and stuff?
Yeah, it for some reason mostly gathered in the teeth and in the bones because of that calcium.
Oh, so it wasn't specifically because they were licking it that it got in their mouths. It just got into their bloodstream, and then the calcium deposits that it ended up replacing just happened to be also in by the jaw?
Yeah, that seems to be what was going on. It also had bone cancer and anemia through the rest of the body. I'm sure it was a little bit more concentrated in the mouth because of that, especially in the teeth and gums because of the direct exposure.
Okay. That was not something I understood previously. I thought it was just sort of a topical application, but you're saying the body actually is probably putting more calcium up in the teeth area on the reg, and because it was using radium instead of calcium, that just ended up there.
Yeah, and that's why it affected the bones of the rest of the body too.
Okay.
Grace Fryer sought the help of a specialist named Dr. Frederick Flynn from Columbia University. After examining Grace, he and a colleague declared that there was nothing wrong with her. The only problem with this was that he wasn't a medical doctor, but a toxicologist from the US Radium Company. His colleague, who also examined her, was also one of the VPs of US Radium.
I'm sure they're 100% objective, though.
Yeah. US Radium wouldn't be able to keep this secret hidden for long, but they very much tried. They paid off doctors and dentists to say that the girls had simply contracted syphilis and to have that listed as the cause of death as soon as they would pass.
Oh, that's nasty. Not only
Yeah.
did they lie about these girls being hurt by their product, they tried to slut shame them and say, oh no, they had some kind of sex disease, you guys.
Yeah, it was straight up trying to sully the reputation of these girls so nobody would believe that it was actually the product doing this. Over the next few years, Grace Fryer would seek out the help of a lawyer. Because of the size of the company and their legal staff, she had a very hard time finding anyone who would take the case. It would take a full 2 years just to find a lawyer who was willing to press a class action lawsuit against US Radium. In 1927, Raymond Berry of the Consumers League of New Jersey represented the Radium Girls, and they sued US Radium for $250,000, just shy of $3.5 million today.
That doesn't sound like a lot, to be honest. Even in modern day dollars.
I think this was for a total of 5 girls, so it wouldn't have been spread too thin.
I guess
really.
also medical costs hadn't ballooned to the point they have today. At
Yeah,
the
like
time.
$3.5 million probably doesn't even cover most cancer treatments these days. US Radium would try to delay the trial, hoping that all of the women in the case would die before they could make it to court. Due to public outcry, the 14-month delay was turned into only a few months. Marie Curie gave credence to some of the girls' claims, but was unable to help beyond that, stating that there was no known way of destroying the substance once it was in the body. So she wanted to try and help, but she really hadn't found any sort of way to get that kind of out of the body once it had taken over. By 1928, when the trial was underway, none of the girls were able to raise their arms to take the oath in court. Some were bedridden, and Grace herself couldn't sit up without a back brace. After the testimony, the case was once again delayed for another few months. US Radium was able to convince the judge to delay the trial because some of their key witnesses were on vacation and would be for several months. Ultimately, the girls would have to settle out of court just so they would have enough money to pay for their medical bills. Each received about $10,000 up front and $600 per year afterwards. All would be dead before the mid-1930s.
This is just... I know this story. I knew this story a little bit before you started telling it, but every time I hear it, it just makes me sad for the state of the world.
And if you want to feel a little bit worse, I've got a statement from US Radium's president.
Okay, go for it. I did want to feel worse. I was just thinking, like, I do feel bad, but man, it's just not bad enough yet. Hit me, Tony.
The company claimed that they settled not because they were wrong, but because they couldn't get a fair trial. US Radium's president Clarence Lee said, "We unfortunately gave work to a great many people who are physically unfit to procure employment in other lines of industry. Cripples and persons similarly incapacitated were engaged. What was then considered an act of kindness on our part has since been turned against us."
I don't swear, and this show is a clean one anyway, but I'm just like, this would be a good opportunity if somebody did want to just tell this guy how they felt about him. That's a thing that I would do.
I get mad at the CEO of Comcast, but like this is a different thing. This is like that Shkreli guy or whatever, like just pulling medicine out from under people.
Worse than him, even. He's giving them the poison.
Yeah, like Clarence Lee would be considered like absolutely evil in my book, and I don't use that word very often in a very serious sense. I'll kind of band it around occasionally. But like this guy seems like an actual like movie villain. Like he's almost too legit evil to like be real.
Yeah, he's so bad you couldn't enjoy the movie that he would be in.
Yeah, it's like this is just not how things go. Anyway, like these would continue for a while, but after a few more lawsuits, the US Radium Company would stop making these sorts of watches in the same way. They wouldn't disappear though. Like they basically got kind of separated into a bunch of smaller companies, did work for other glow-in-the-dark products that use like a titanium type lighting from what I was reading, and they actually were still in operation in sort of different ways into the 80s before they were stripped again by a bunch of different conglomerate companies that bought parts of it. Their last remaining facilities stopped in 2007, and it was declared basically a Superfund cleanup site because it had polluted 250 homes in the area around it and was basically just a complete mess of environmental disaster. So it's the company that just basically kept on giving, and now they kind of aren't identifiable anymore, thankfully, because it never seemed like they quite turned it around. It's kind of like the thalidomide people.
Yeah, it sounds like they just kept going with the suck.
Yeah.
Like like it wasn't like, wow, we have some real bad stuff in our past, but we're gonna get better. It's not like the Volkswagen Corporation that, you know, started out as a Nazi thing and then said, well, we'll just keep making cars, I guess, and the Beetle's pretty cool. It's not like, I mean, granted, they still had some problems later on, but
yeah, like the whole like lying about miles per gallon and all that sort of stuff. But that's lying about miles per gallon is pretty minor compared to, you know,
Holocaust?
directly poisoning your employees.
Yes.
And then calling them sluts. I was actually informed of this particular thing, the Radium Girls, the first time by a show called 1,000 Ways to Die. Terrible, terrible show back on like Spike TV or something like that. And like the specific one that they did was a couple that would take the paint home and just paint all over themselves every night before like hooking up so that they could be glowing in the dark.
Because it's an MTV thing. I get it.
Yeah, it was just a very, very odd program, and that was the first time I'd heard about the Radium Girls, and I did a little bit more research after that. And it's funny how in 1,000 Ways to Die, they always made the people dying seem like really, really bad people, not just like victims of circumstance.
They actually played into the slut shaming. They were like, no, she probably did also have syphilis, though.
Yeah, straight up.
They were having sex. Jason would have killed him if the radium hadn't got him.
Anyway, I think that's going to do it for Radium Girls today. I know that there's a little bit more out there, and if you guys have any comments on this, we would love to read them. Check out the YouTube channel, subscribe there, put comments on this video, or tweet us at Human Echoes. If you enjoyed this show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/humanechoes. Supporting us there for as little as $2 a month is a great way to show your support, and we would be very, very much indebted to you for that. Thank you all, and we will see you again with more bad ideas next week.
Bye, guys.